That is the best description we can possibly have of where we are sitting at after a week one demolition of the Cleveland Browns by the Tennessee Titans. Thank you for stopping by this live podcast. I hope this goes well and everybody can get a hold of it where you need to, live or otherwise, as we process right now at about 4:30 the terrible game played by the Cleveland Browns and the very good game played by the Tennessee Titans. So I want to really start with that, and I want to make sure we're very clear. We're going to focus a lot on what the Browns did wrong and bad and some of those kind of things. And today's title is called Believing the Lies, but we really got to start with saying the Tennessee Titans played well. We want to make sure we credit the Tennessee Titans for how they played because they deserve that credit. It would be irresponsible of us to do otherwise, right? And so we're going to do that. We're going to say the Tennessee Titans played a good game. We'll talk about them here in just a little bit. But first, we're just going to start with believing that we believe some lies. I honestly believe, as Browns fans, as Browns media, as the NFL, that we believe some lies that honestly we could have seen coming, and we've mentioned. But unfortunately, we hoped that they would have the ability to overcome those lies. And so the first lie that we believed is that we believed that the offensive line wasn't that important. And what I mean by that important is there was some belief that the Browns could overcome the offensive line with talent, with scheme. And there's some truth to that at times. But the reality is when your offensive line struggles like it did today, there really is no overcoming that. It's just not possible. We saw really early that Baker Mayfield didn't look comfortable. We saw very early that it was tough to run the ball. We saw very early that the Titans were in control, and that starts up front. It starts with the offensive line. And so we were told that last year, and we'll talk about Baker here in a second, but we were told last year that in the second half of the season, because there were no sacks, that Baker Mayfield got the ball out quickly. We were told that the offensive line played well. When the reality was last year, Baker Mayfield bailed out the offensive line time and time again. And in reality, didn't often get the ball out of his hands quickly. Instead, he extended plays, moved throughout the pocket, was able to do just enough that he didn't get sacked. He was able to do that when Greg Robinson and Chris Hubbard were okay, but the middle of the offensive line was great. Joe Bitonio, J.C. Treader, and Kevin Zeitler were great. So when you only have to worry about the outside rush, Baker Mayfield could get creative, could make things happen. Today, this year, at least as of now, you have Greg Robinson and Chris Hubbard still, who didn't play okay in this game, but you also have Eric Kush at right guard. And so that downgrade not only is just an overall downgrade and a downgrade at a position, but it also makes it far more difficult for Baker Mayfield to escape, to make things happen. When he's not just worried about left tackle, right tackle, he's worried about left tackle, right tackle now and the interior of the offensive line. And we saw that time and time again with Baker, with falling back, underthrows, forcing the ball, little things like that. But we believe the lie that last year the Browns' offensive line was fixed because they didn't give up sacks and because, quote-unquote, Baker Mayfield got the ball out of his hands quickly. That just didn't happen in week one. And in a lot of ways, it's because the offensive line matters more than we gave it credit for. We thought Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, David Njoku, Rashard Higgins, Kareem Hunt, some point in time Antonio Callaway and I'm sorry, not Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, and at some point in time Antonio Callaway and Kareem Hunt, that amount of skill could or would be enough to overcome a very poor offensive line. We believe that lie because last year, the last half of the year, it seemed like the offensive line wasn't a big deal. But it is. It is a huge deal for the offensive line to deal with three players that the quarterback has no certainty about. Obviously, Greg Robinson got kicked out of the game. Chris Hubbard then had to play left tackle when Lamb went out of the game, Kendall Lamb, for being injured. So then you had a kind of a guard swing tackle in McCray play right tackle and Hubbard at left tackle. All of that is messed up, but here's the thing. It was messed up before all of that happened. The offensive line was struggling before Greg Robinson was kicked out of the game, before Kendall Lamb got hurt, before all that movement. So don't believe the lie that it was only because of all the movement and the injuries and the kicking out and all that stuff. The offensive line matters. You have to be able to control a game at some level at the offensive line. Your quarterback has to know and have confidence in parts of the offensive line, and he didn't. We also believe the lie that preseason didn't matter. Many people told us that, and many of us, media, fans, whatever, were okay with it. We didn't want Baker Mayfield getting hurt, Odell Beckham Jr. getting hurt. We didn't want them to give away the store and see what we got. So we got this weird haphazard preseason where the Browns didn't run a lot of the offense that we thought they would run. They didn't run the ball a lot. They didn't have any of that going on, and they didn't have a lot of players play. And we saw a lot of lack of continuity, lack of timing, especially again at the offensive line. We saw a lot of that kind of stuff to the point that we have to question Freddie Kitchens. Listen, I love Freddie Kitchens as a head coach, at least so far. This week, we're starting to wonder, is he ready? There was a timeout that he didn't take before the 2-minute warning that I think was important. Could it have changed things? Who knows? But it happened, and then the punter kicked it to the 3-yard line, safety, Eric Lamb was hurt, all kinds of stuff happened, right? We have to question Freddie Kitchens' use of preseason and what happened after that. We have to. The team was not ready. We have to question Freddie Kitchens and his coaching staff because, right and wrong, the Cleveland Browns had a boatload of penalties. They just did. And it's really interesting and honestly somewhat difficult because right now I feel both empty emotion, no emotion, as well as a lot of anger and frustration, a lot of letdown, right? But we have to be honest and question Freddie Kitchens. Does that mean he's not worthy of the job, all that kind of stuff? That stuff's for a different time. That's another question. But we have to question how he prepared this team for this game. We have to question Baker Mayfield, who did not look good, did not look comfortable, did not look like a leader. We didn't see him a lot on the sidelines talking to his players. Now, again, we're limited in what we see. So did we only see when he wasn't talking to the players? It's very possible. But he didn't seem overly engaged in the game, much of the game, with his players, coaches, those kind of things. He seemed to kind of be staring off a lot. Even early in the game, he didn't seem overly engaged. Again, he was throwing off his back foot a lot, didn't seem comfortable to step up in the pocket, and to be honest, he was holding the ball way too long. But remember, the last 8 games of last year, that ended up working out for him. Now, there were times, obviously, he got rid of the ball. He got the ball, 3-step drop, boom, ball's out, great. That happened last year. But there were a lot of times where Baker would try to make plays happen, and it worked. So you can't fault him that today it didn't. It just can be frustrating to watch him hold on to the ball, takes a sack, gets hit, has thrown it away, whatever has to happen, and then many people blame the offensive line. We believe the lie that any hit on a quarterback generally is due to the offensive line, but really the quarterback needs to get the ball out within about 2 seconds. And Baker didn't do that a lot today. Now, whether that was Tennessee had great coverage, receivers not getting open, the offensive line, it can be a lot of things. This blame isn't about one thing, it's about understanding all of it, right? And so when we get to watch the All-22 film, we'll have a better idea what was going on in the secondary, what was going on in the offensive line, what was going on in Baker Mayfield, because what we're really looking for is when he hits the back foot, that's when the ball should be out. And Baker did that a lot last year. Hit his back foot, boom, ball's out. We didn't see a ton of that today. So we do have to question a little bit about Baker Mayfield. Did we believe it was just going to happen that he would go from having this great rookie year to taking that next step in his second year? I did. I believed it. But did we believe a lie? Because the sophomore slump often is real. When teams have more and more time to get film on you, to understand what you're doing, prepare for you, all that, the sophomore slump can be very real, right? It'll be interesting to see how Pat Mahomes does this year, because really this is his sophomore year. Even though it's his third year in the league, this is his second year starting. So he had a great first game, got hurt a little bit, came back, whatever. We'll find out. I just saw the score at one point in time on that game. But sophomore slumps are real for a lot of reasons. And many of us believe the lie that Baker Mayfield would just go from a great rookie year where he was amazing to an even better second year, and that may not be real. Okay? Now, again, this isn't just a poo-poo because we got destroyed. It's a little bit of that because we got destroyed, right? The Browns got destroyed. They got pretty much owned after the first drive. And so, is it overreaction? I don't know. Because here's the thing. We only have week 1 to go off of. So it's not overreaction to react to the only thing we have. It's it. Now, after week 2, if week 2 is terrible, it's not overreaction to think it was terrible. But if they have a really good game, now we have a balance. So if week 2 they play really, really well, we can't come on and just be like, well, they're great, everything's fixed. That's just unrealistic because then we have 2 weeks to go off of. But right now we have 1 week for this team, who they are, what they are. Maybe we're overreacting. But what's really interesting is that the Tennessee Titans, in a lot of ways, their defense treated the Browns like Michigan State. Now, this is going to go back a couple years, and you have to be a Buckeyes fan or follow college football, or a Michigan State fan, I guess, or just a Big Ten or a college football fan. But in a lot of ways, the Titans defense played the Cleveland Browns like the Michigan State defense played J.T. Barrett. Now, J.T. Barrett is nowhere near the quarterback Baker Mayfield is and never was that quarterback, but the Titans played Baker Mayfield and the Browns offense that way. They pressed up, their linebackers filling the gaps, and they really believed that they could get to the quarterback before the quarterback could find openings in either their zone or their man defense, depending on what they were playing most of the time. And in a lot of ways, they were right. Now the Browns go against Greg Williams' defense, which is a different beast and was, in my mind, not very good all the time. But Greg Williams likes to bring pressure. Greg Williams has some talent on that Jets defense. It'll be interesting to see if other defenses start to treat the Browns like Michigan State treated J.T. Barrett. Because it's not about Baker Mayfield. It's actually about the Browns' offensive line. And it's actually about the routes that the Browns ran. That doesn't work. That type of defense doesn't work when the Browns are running a lot of quick routes. Instead, the Browns were often, and again, we have to watch the All-22 to see what was going on in the secondary and all of that kind of stuff. But the Browns were often running deep routes, 6-move routes. I'm over-exaggerating, but even the Rashard Higgins big, long catch in the first drive, there was like 3 moves in there, right? And so when you're playing that type of defense, when you're pressing the line of scrimmage to stop the run and get after the quarterback, the ball has to get out quick, and there has to be receivers running quick routes. But when the primary receiver is running a deep route or a 3-move route, all of a sudden that defense works, even if you have a really good quarterback like Baker Mayfield is. So it'll be interesting to see if other teams go there. And finally, and I'm just going to touch on this because I'm actually going to write a subscriber piece for the OBR. We believe the lie that John Dorsey was always going to be right. Right? We believe the lie that John Dorsey, if he did it, it must be good. It must be a great idea. All kinds of things. Sorry, folks. That just isn't accurate. Now, has John Dorsey had a lot of good moves? Absolutely. Do we think that drafting Baker Mayfield and Denzel Ward and Nick Chubb were all great moves? Yeah. Last year we added Jannard Avery to that list, right? And now Jannard Avery is inactive. That's a very confusing thing that we'll have to look at. Maybe they thought the Titans were going to run the ball a lot more, so Avery was less necessary as the third pass rusher, but it's going to be interesting to also look at snap counts. And so I'm actually writing that down because I want to look at the defensive snap counts, so I don't want to forget. But do we think John Dorsey made great moves to sign Jarvis Landry, trade for and sign Jarvis Landry. Yes. Baker Mayfield, Denzel Ward, Nick Chubb, great moves, right? And yet, Austin Corbett, Chad Thomas, Greg Robinson, Chris Hubbard, right? And so I want to remind you that Chris Hubbard was basically brought on because Todd Haley wanted him, and John Dorsey said yes. Doesn't mean John Dorsey thought he was terrible and agreed to it, but he brought him on because Todd Haley wanted him to come over from Pittsburgh. And that goes back to retaining Hugh Jackson for last year, who brought in Todd Haley. Now, that could have all worked out if Freddie Kitchens is the coach we hope he is and Baker Mayfield, all that stuff works out. It could be. But we have to be honest that Chris Hubbard is here because of Todd Haley, and Todd Haley was here because of Hugh Jackson making a third year, which was John Dorsey and Jimmy Haslam's decision. But again, Dorsey was a part of that process. Dorsey took the job knowing that could be possible. So he still has to take some responsibility for that. But again, the offensive line looks terrible. He traded Zeitler for Olivier Vernon. Now, is Vernon going to be good? Absolutely. But he weakened an already weak unit to add to a maybe not as weak or a strong unit, depending on what you think about Myles Garrett and Jannard Avery. So, again, we believed the lie. Many of us have believed the lie that if John Dorsey does it, it must be a good idea. And there are a lot of questionable decisions. Again, Chris Hubbard, Austin Corbett, Chad Thomas, those are just a start. Greg Robinson, again this year, bringing him back. Even, we'll have to look at what the draft looked like, but even drafting Greedy Williams, who looks like a steal where they got him, over getting an offensive lineman. There's a lot of questions about how John Dorsey has dealt with things. Again, this isn't to say he hasn't done a good job in other areas. We would do the Odell Beckham Jr. trade time and time again. We absolutely would. But again, at least how they are officially talking about it, that Kevin Zeitler for Olivier Vernon trade would have happened even if the Browns wouldn't have gotten OBJ. Now, I'll tell you, behind the scenes, I've reported that was a part of the discussion for OBJ the whole time. But according to how they're talking about it, that is just not true. So we get to question John Dorsey in a lot of ways. We don't have to believe the lie that everything John Dorsey does is great, or that John Dorsey has put together this amazing team. Because the reality is the most important place is always in the trenches. On the defensive side of the ball, they've done a really good job. I think he's made some good decisions. I like Olivier Vernon, again, but it's at the cost of Kevin Zeitler. When some people thought maybe the New York Giants would have traded Olivier Vernon for nothing or released him, a lot of things like that. Again, we don't know what to believe, but he sacrificed one side of the trench for the other side. And I think, at least as of today, we maybe would rather have Jannard Avery starting as the other defensive end and Kevin Zeitler as the right guard. If that's an even trade the way it was, I think at least after today we would say that. Now, after week 2, 3, 4, and after week 17, when we can evaluate all of it together, then we can have a better idea. But at least after week 1, listen, that's what we're doing. We're evaluating week 1. I think I would rather have Jannard Avery than I would rather than have and have Kevin Zeitler than have Olivier Vernon and Eric Kush. And again, I'm not even haven't looked at the film enough to know even if Kush was that terrible. What I do know is Baker Mayfield wasn't comfortable in the pocket. Part of that goes back to a decision made by John Dorsey. So we tend to believe the lies. We tend to believe what we want to hear. We tend to believe the limited sample size in preseason we saw when Baker Mayfield led that drive against the Colts, and they looked amazing. And, oh, look, the offense is going to be great. But the Colts weren't bringing the kind of pressure that the Titans did. They weren't pressing the line of scrimmage. They weren't forcing Baker Mayfield to make quick decisions when he has long routes going on, right? So, again, the Browns struggled. We do need to talk about the referees. We absolutely do. And here's what we'll say. We have to remember that, like a lot of things, the refs are human. They're going to make mistakes, and they made a lot of them. What's really interesting is those mistakes tend to go downhill. Were there times that the Browns got screwed? Absolutely. But how many times did players like Myles Garrett punch or slap at a player? Did, I think it was Sheldon Richardson, push Marcus Mariota 2 steps after Mariota had gotten rid of the ball? Had done a lot of those kind of things. Again, at the end of the game, DeVaro Lawrence, whatever he said to the referee, right? We have Greg Robinson kicked a dude in the head, right? That's an Ndamukong Suh type of thing. Now, a little bit different. Obviously, he was falling and all kinds of stuff. I'm not comparing the two, but that is a bad decision, right? And so when you have all of those bad decisions, that emotional piece, that psychological piece of a referee, things tend to go downhill and you tend to get those calls against you. And so given all of that, it's not surprising that the penalties went against the Browns. You do question now whether or not Freddie Kitchens ran a disciplined enough team, preseason, whatever, training camp. He seemed to talk about it a lot, and we didn't seem to see a lot of problems. But was there enough focus on discipline? Was there enough focus on making sure you don't get too emotional and make stupid decisions? Was that there? We don't know, but we do know there's a lot of penalties. Even if half of them, let's just say half, and I haven't counted, and I'm probably not going to. If half of them were referees, poor choices, they screwed the Browns, all that kind of stuff, if that's true, then the Browns still had way too many penalties, right? So even if half of those penalties were wrong, the Browns still had way too many penalties. They made way too many poor decisions, poor choices. Now, on the other side of that, the Titans didn't get called for things the Browns did. That plays a role. But anybody thinking that this game was totally decided by the refs obviously didn't watch it, obviously aren't looking even at the final scoreboard. The refs made it very, very difficult. The refs didn't make good calls. But you had one team who played undisciplined that then got more calls against them. And you had one team that played what seemed like a pretty disciplined game. It's called confirmation bias. Listen, I can speak very clear to this because in school I had a best friend. His name's Mike. Lives in Arizona now. And he was my best friend from like 5th grade on. And those who know me now would be maybe a little surprised, but I was kind of a hellion. 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade kind of. Mostly 5th, 6th, 7th. But here's the thing. Mike and I pretty much did the exact same things. Mike didn't get caught early, and he was a little quieter, but behavior-wise was doing a lot of the same things. I got labeled as the troublemaker, the class clown, all of whatever it was, and probably deservedly so. Guess what the class clown had happen? He got caught for everything, and even things he didn't do got blamed on him, and people, the teachers believed him, right? Mike, on the other hand, was kind of the angel. I mean, I literally got said, why can't you be like your friend Mike? Mike's never getting in trouble. Mike's not doing anything stupid, blah, 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 blah. Mike's mom sometimes was worried about me hanging out with Mike. We were doing the same thing. I wasn't the bad influence. Oh, I probably was a little bit of the bad influence, but we were doing kind of the same stuff. But confirmation bias is once you kind of get labeled, or once you do some things that get caught, they're more looking for you to do some things to get caught for. And when you're the good kid who doesn't get caught and looks like they're doing disciplined things and you're quiet, and you're more likely to get away with a lot of things. Is that to excuse the refs? Absolutely not. But the Browns have a responsibility to themselves to play disciplined football. When you're not playing disciplined football, people are more likely to notice all the ways you're not playing disciplined football. When you're slapping people, when you're kicking them, when you're saying whatever DeVaro Lawrence said, all the other things, when you're not playing disciplined, refs naturally, it's a way people are naturally looking for the next thing that you're going to do stupid, or the next mistake you're going to make, whatever you want to call it. And that is the way things are. That is life. And then you add to that the Browns having this history and all of that kind of stuff. Again, I don't think the NFL is against them, but it's not good. Next week, wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't go great either, especially if the Browns start out undisciplined. And again, that comes back to coaching. We always blame coaching for undisciplined play, unless it's like one, right? Or one player. If it's one player acting a fool or one player who does multiple stupid things, you can blame that player. And the coaches should by pulling that player, right? In this case, it was a lot of players and a lot of plays that unfortunately led to a terrible game by the Cleveland Browns. A morning that started out for many of us as new hope, new excitement, a new era. Many of us struggled with excitement and wanting this game to start, wanted this game to end. We believed a lot of lies for week one. We believe the Titans, and that's one of the things I kind of want to end on. We believe the Titans, who didn't make any splashy moves, who don't really have any splashy players, we believe that they were going to get destroyed by the Cleveland Browns. We believe, and this is another thing with John Dorsey, we believe that the Titans, who didn't change a lot, were the underdog. And that the Browns, who changed a ton, were ready to dominate that team. Continuity and consistency matter, folks. The Tennessee Titans showed you that. That continuity, consistency, discipline, and talent, you got to have all of it. And good coaching matter. And in that, they put the Cleveland Browns, their fans, and the media in their place. And unfortunately, we go into another Monday where being a Browns fan is somewhat depressing. Week 2, they get another chance. Hopefully they learn their lesson. There's not a lot that they can do to change their offensive line. I'll tell you this, I don't see them trading for Trent Williams. It's almost like they would just tell the Washington, here, whatever you want, because they have no leverage at this point in time. And Washington wants to hold on to Trent Williams. And Trent Williams wants a lot of money. So I don't see them doing that. Could they? Sure. But in the end, that's probably costing more than they paid for Odell Beckham Jr. Whether you're okay with that or not is up to you. Whether John Dorsey is okay with that or not is up to him. But the Cleveland Browns can control a lot of things that they didn't do well in week 1 going into week 2. It starts with discipline. It starts with making a plan. And for fans, it starts with us not believing the lie that exciting talent on the outside and even an exciting quarterback is enough. The offensive line is far more important than we've ever given it credit for. And we saw that today. Let's see. Let's see how they make adjustments going into week 2. That'll say a lot about the coaching staff. Is week 2 a must-win? Yeah, probably. We'll probably say that, but are we going to believe that lie? There are plenty of teams that have started out 0-2 and still made the playoffs. But we'll probably believe the lie. We'll probably talk about it that way. My key as a process guy is I want to see the Browns play better. Whether they win or not, it's a different conversation. But the Browns need to play better. They need to play more disciplined. Freddie Kitchens needs to coach them differently. The defense needs to be more consistent. They seem to give up, which I understand at some point in time. A lot of things have to change for week 2 to be any better. The final result will be the final result. I need to see a better process. Thank you for stopping by this live and then recorded recording of the OBR Straight Talk podcast. My name is Jared Mueller. You can get a hold of me on Twitter at Jared K. Mueller. That's JaredKMueller. Thanks for stopping by. I hope your Sunday is not ruined. Hope your Monday goes better. And go Browns.